And we're live! Welcome back to the shop, everyone. It is another week where Sarah is not going to be able to join us. She just got back a minute ago, and she has been at the hospital for the last 14 hours or so. So you got me tonight, and we're going to be having a little bit of fun. So for those of you who don't know, my wife is a nurse, and her hospital is getting totally slammed at the moment, so she is doing crazy hours, but it looks like she's going to have tomorrow off, which will be great to have her home for Thanksgiving. But yeah, we're going to have a bit of fun with that. Tonight we're talking glues. So if you do have any questions, throw them in the chat, and I will try to get to them. If they scroll up past and I don't see the question, go ahead and post it again. I can only see like the last 12 or so questions. And I'll try and keep an eye on that, but if there is a super chat, that turns bright colors so I can actually see it coming. So I wanted to actually go through a lot of the glues that are out there. And if you haven't seen it, I have a glue test that I did a while ago where I actually did a comprehensive test of 64 different glues. Here. 64 different glues. We tested long grain to long grain, long grain to end grain, gap filling, as well as exterior conditions, and there were some very surprising things. So if you want to see that, I have a link to that whole test video down below where we go into great detail about how everything came out. But there's a lot of other little questions and things about what glue is best in what situations, because there is no one best glue that does all things. And I want to kind of go through some of that and dispel a few of the misnomers and misinformations along the way. So, don't see anything right now. There have been a few things going on in the shop, so I thought I would show you guys these. So I've got this big beam here. This is a massive white oak beam. It is 6 inches by 8 inches, and that is going to be turning into a mantle that I'm working on right now. So that should be a lot of fun. I'm actually staining it, so it's going to be dark, but I'm going to be graining it down a little bit. There hasn't been too much on Sarah's bench going on because, well, she hasn't been in the shop to work on it. But I do have this that's been happening. These are 2 beam drills. So the one on the left is one that I got a while ago. And it was the one that I used. But the one on the right is one that I just finished restoring. And so I'm actually using that one in the working on the mantle, and I got a few other projects. So I restored that one and painted it blue because that's the one I wanted. It's the one with all the features I've been looking for. So I'm actually going to be selling my other beam drill this weekend on the Can I Have It tool auction group. So if you've been wanting a beam drill, yes, I will ship that. So stay tuned for that. It is going to be a fun one. Let's see. Make sure there's no questions before I jump in. Okay, cool. And if you do have a question, if you can put question or notifier at the beginning so I can see it, that way I don't have to try and read through all of them while we're live. So let's actually go through some of the glues that I have out here. And this is probably about half of the glues that I have in the shop. Because I've been doing glue tests, I have a lot of different glues and a lot of different things I've played with. So what we've got here are our more traditional, like our hide glues. And these are actually, hide. They're animal hide that has been treated. And I actually have a video showing how to make your own animal hide if you want to see it. But this is one that you can actually buy. And it comes in 3 different types. This one's where you can get from Tools from Working Wood. This is one that was sent to me by a German. And this, if I remember correctly, this one was something different. This was actually like a brain glue rather than a hide glue. But unfortunately, I can't read German, so I can't quite remember. And hide glues are a very, very, very good glue. They're antiques lasting hundreds of years that have been held together with hide glue. And it is a very reliable glue. To do it the traditional way is a little bit messy because you have a glue pot and you have to keep it warm, you have to keep moisture in it, and there's a lot of little things like that. There are new versions of it, like the Titebond hide glue. The nice thing about it is it's very easily reversible. You can add a little bit of moisture or a little bit of heat, or actually quite a bit of heat, and you can take it apart. And so there are some pros and cons to that as opposed to the modern PVA glues. I got a super chat here. Steve Does Stuff. Ooh, I like that name. Because I've missed a few Tuesdays due to work. Oh, well, thanks, man. Sorry, I don't have my wife's mom joke list, so not going to have those tonight. Sorry, everyone. So into hide glues, and hide glues come in a bunch of different types. Basically, any type of protein can turn into a hide glue. You have hide glue, which is the most common, which is made from the hide. It's a byproduct of tanning the hide. There is brain glue, there is bone glue, there is fish glue. Basically, any animal protein can be turned into a glue. And it is nice that it's reversible. It's nice that it is very simple and easy to use. Most of them have a decent amount of working time. They have a little bit of lubrication, so if you have a joint that needs to slide together, they slide in nicely. They don't kind of like tack up and lock. The downside is they're kind of messy to work with, and you have to have the heat and the pot and everything running to actually make them work. So I don't use hide glues that much because they require a good bit more work. There are a few places, but generally the pros for me don't outweigh the cons. In other words, the reversibility doesn't outweigh the messiness of working with it. The one exception to that is some of the pre-made hide glues. They can get Titebond and old brown glue. These are really, really nice. And let me fix that focus. Both of these work very well. They do basically the exact same thing that traditional glues do, and they held up very, very similar on the test. The Titebond actually did phenomenally well. So I use these a lot of times if I need a reversible glue. The one place where I do love this is anytime I'm working with leather, the hide glue is the stuff to use. This is just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it's made from leather, and so it works really well. So for putting leather on devices, it is great. For putting gluing leather onto steel, this leather has been on there for 4 or 5 years, and it is not coming off in the slightest, and it's holding on really, really well. That's hide glue, and it is a great, great place for it. Oh yes, and happy Thanksgiving to everyone for tomorrow. So seeing if there's any questions before I'm moving on. Cool. The next step up is dropping a holdfast on the floor, is PVAs, and most wood glues fall into the PVA category. Now this is kind of a broad category because there are some things that some people classify as PVAs and other things that people don't. The most common is the Titebonds. I have Titebond Original, Titebond 2, Titebond 3. And for the longest time, Titebond 2 was the one I used. It's a very good all-around glue. It's cheap, it's readily available, and it is a phenomenal wood glue. Now, the one downside to these is they're not as easy to reversible. Contrary to popular belief, they are reversible. You can actually reverse a PVA glue by introducing moisture, but then you're introducing moisture into your wood. Whereas with the hide glues, you can do it with just introducing heat. It just takes a lot of heat. With PVA glues, you can do it with moisture and take it apart. But because it's moisture, you're probably going to be hurting your finish and other things on there, so it might not be the easiest way to reverse, but it is technically reversible. Another common myth is Titebond 3 is waterproof. It even says on the label, waterproof. The test that I have done with it, it is not waterproof. It might be water resistant. It held up far better than the original, the Titebond 2. But it still came apart very, very easily in moist conditions. In other words, when the boards were moist and I tested them in a moist condition, it failed rather miserably. So none of these PVA glues did anything well with moisture. And so I will not use Titebond 3 in exterior conditions anymore. It just did not stand up to it. There are a bunch of other little things in here, like the Quick and Thick. It's a thicker, smooier glue that doesn't tack up as much and it's much more flexible. So if you need things to be moving around for a little bit, that worked well. This won't move around for a lot, but it will be a little bit more flexible for joints that are tight. Hey, Queen Sarah has arrived to save the day. What's that?
My children could care less. I'm home now.
They have their electronics. Well, thank you for coming down. So everyone say thank you because Sarah hasn't been sleeping in a while. And she still decided to come down here and grace our presence. Yeah, you have to turn on both that and the receiver up top. So Quick and Thick is great for when you need a bond to come together easily, or it needs something to slide in, or you're doing a little bit of gap filling. This actually held up relatively well in the gap filling. One of the surprising things, regular Elmer's glue, school glue. It is a PVA glue. This actually did really well. I was very impressed with it. Let me see. I think it was like I don't see it on here. Elmer's glue. It actually did better than some of the high glues. It did better than Gorilla construction adhesive. It did better than any of the contact cements. It wasn't the best PVA because it's not made for it, but it actually held up pretty well. Most of the rest of them fell fairly similarly. There's some pros and cons, like the 4/4. This is stuff you can get from Tools for Working Wood. This is a fast setting glue. So this is one where you can glue up the joint and 20 minutes later come back and pound on it, and it's a pretty decent joint. I mean, it still takes overnight to cure, but it will set up and give you a high strength pretty quickly. So 4/4, I really like this stuff, and I've been using it a good bit more. But the one overarching best glue that really came out of it was the Elmer's Wood Glue Max. This stuff really, really surprised me to the point that I'm actually, when I run out of my Titebond 2, which is actually pretty soon here, that's all I've got left of it, I'm going to be buying a gallon of Elmer's Wood Glue Max because it outperformed all the rest of these phenomenally well. So that's my new general all-around go-to glue is Elmer's Wood Glue Max. Let's see, were there any questions before I jump in the next section? How long will Titebond wood glue last in the bottle once it's opened? I don't know. I don't know if it has a shelf life on here. Procedures. I don't see a shelf life on here. I've had this one for almost 3 years now, and I still use it. It's still good. So yeah, it's pretty decent stuff. The nice thing about high glues is they don't really go bad. They just dry. And once they're dry, you just add water back to them, and they're good to go. I mean, because these come dry, and all you do is add water to it. And if it's in a glue joint and you want it to come apart, you add a little water to it, and it will come apart. And then you can put it back together, and it will reseal itself. So the high glues are really good in that they really don't have any major shelf life issues. Some of these ones that stay liquid have urea added into them, which give them a little bit more working time. And so some people think that urea will cause them to go bad, but I haven't had that in my experience. So yeah, shelf life, it's a while. Hey, Alan, thank you. All hail Queen of the Gnomes, White Oak.
All right, hang on.
Oh, she's got the mom jokes for you, Alan. And there was one earlier I didn't get a mom joke for.
My duties.
She takes her duties seriously. Are you looking up?
I'm ready.
Oh, yeah, she's ready. Okay. What you got?
What do you get when you pick a pig's nose?
I don't know.
Ham boogers.
Got it. Got it. Nice one. Nice one. Oh, Bridget, thanks. Spa day for Sarah. Yes, she needs it. A couple of them. So we were talking about that ahead of time. Where after COVID's all done, we're all going to pitch in and get you a spa day.
Ready?
Yes.
Did you know Yoda had a last name?
Lehihu.
Oh!
Yes, I got it. You're Lehihu.
You can't hear me.
Did you stand up and make sure it's on?
I did. I don't think this one's on.
3 seconds of holding.
I got it now.
You got it.
Oh, do I need to retell my joke?
People let us know if you didn't hear it, but I'm going to move on with this then.
Okay.
You have this like smear stuff in the middle where they don't really fall into any other categories. And one of them are, well, the first one to make it interesting was the Gorilla Glue. And this is actually a foaming polyurethane glue. And the nice thing about this is it bonds to anything. You get this stuff on you and it stays. It's something that it will hold to any surface. And there was a myth going around that This is great for gap filling because it foams up and it fills the gaps. Then that must mean that it's strong on the gaps. But in reality, once it foams up, it doesn't really adhere to itself. It will adhere to the sidewalls, but there's nothing holding those two sidewalls together, and they'll shear off. So do not use Gorilla Glue or any of these foaming glues in gap filling situations. They're not meant for that. They're meant for joints where the two surfaces have a really good bonding surface together, where they meet and they fit well together. Then this is a pretty decent glue. And the nice thing about it is that it is water activated. So with some water in the wood, it goes a little bit faster. You do have to keep a lot of clamping pressure on this because if you don't, then the foam will actually force the joint apart. So you got to keep it tight and close together. That's another thing with PVA glues. With PVA glues, you have to have clamping pressure. You have to have serious clamping pressure to hold these together. And some of them, the rating for it is like 120 psi. So it's got to be a lot of clamping pressure for this. You're never going to starve the joint. That's another myth. Starving the joint doesn't exist. You clamp the board until it crushes, and then you've put enough pressure on it. You're not going to ever clamp it to the point where you squeeze the glue out. With high glues, you don't need quite as much clamping pressure. You still need some, but the high glue doesn't have to have the clamping pressure to hold it together. Any questions before I jump in the next part?
Well, one, they want me to repeat.
Okay, repeat the jokes then.
Okay.
What was the first one?
Well, you can't answer now. What do you get when you pick a pig's nose?
What do you get when you pick a pig's nose?
Yes. Ham boogers. And did you know Yoda had a last name?
What was it?
It's Lehu.
Okay, moving on. The next interesting one that really surprised me was weld wood. Now, in the last video where I did the glue series, I didn't realize, even after editing, that I kept calling this weld bond. It's not weld bond, it's weld wood. And I'm sorry, but I corrected it down below and I put it as many notifications. But the Weldwood plastic resin, this stuff is surprisingly amazing in pretty much all aspects. In general strength, in water resistant, this held up incredibly well across the board. It was the best exterior glue. It beat out the epoxies. It actually had a great strength overall. And as glues, this was by far the best glue tested. The downside to it is you have to mix it just right. You have to get the ratios just right. And the problem is it's easy to mix a decent size batch, but it's hard to mix a small batch. It's hard to mix just a little bit of glue for this joint you have to do. And so this kind of becomes a pain to use. And the extra strength really isn't worth it because anything stronger than a Titebond 2 is stronger than the wood. The joint will not break. This joint will not break. This joint will not break. This joint will not break. The glue around it will break. And so there really isn't any reason to get that strong. With the exception of exterior uses. If I'm doing something outside, the Weldwood, this is what I'm using. It is a phenomenal glue. And if you want to see links to any of these glues, down below I have a link to the spreadsheet that has all of the glues listed out. And on all of those, you can actually go and see the exact glues, as well as you can see the whole listing of all the data that I had for the glue test. It's all down below in the link. So this is another one that is now a staple in my shop that I never thought I would use until I actually tested it. So that's one of the big changes for me. Any questions before I jump on to the next section?
Yes. Colton asked, I found that when, I don't know if you meant thickening, it came out thicknessing wood, removing equal parts of material from both sides minimizes wood movement. Has this been the case for you?
Yes, yeah, because what happens is the inside of the wood usually has a different moisture content than the outside of the wood. And so if you remove all the material from one side, then you're going to have one side that either has more moisture or less moisture than the other side. And that's always going to cause the imbalance when the moisture leaves that side. So if you have one side that has too much moisture and the moisture eventually leaves that side, then that side is going to cup, and you're going to have problems. So if you take it off of both sides, then you're making sure that both sides have the same moisture content as you go down. So it's very, very important, especially if you haven't let the wood set in the shop for a while. But really doesn't have much application to gluing. Next one was the CA glues, cyanoacrylate super glues. These ones were relatively surprising as well. And I've got this kit from 2P10 that has thin, thick, gel, medium, and then a spray bonder. And I really didn't expect these to do well. It's CA glue. It's an instant glue, and it's very brittle, and so it's not going to do very well. And the thin glues did not do well, and I think that's because the thin glues wicked out into the wood and they disappeared, or they didn't have the bonding time to actually connect. However, the thick CA glues actually did really well, to the point that they were just as strong, if not stronger, than the PVA glues. And in testing cheap CA glues to the expensive 2P10, the cheap CA glues did just as well. The stuff I bought from the dollar store did just as well as the thick 2P10. And that was something that was really, really surprising. Now, one of the things I'm really looking forward to testing is this test was done a few days after it was all glued together. So it was all pretty new glue. I have enough tests currently up in my garage to do this test every 6 months for the next 30 years. So we're actually going to see what the long-term test is for this. So the next series on that will be coming out in December, which I'm really looking forward to actually seeing what is the 1 year timeline. So the first 6 month and 1 year for the glue test. I know what the 6 month is, but I'm not telling anyone yet. So it'll be kind of fun to see how the years come out. And that's the thing I'm interested with super glue, is it bonds well. It gives a great glue connection as long as it's put in there right. But how does it stand up to long-term use? And that's something I'm looking forward to testing. And I also did several tests with the activator and without the activator, so we could see that. The next and last category I have here, well, all right, no, not the next. There are a couple other categories, but the next main category is epoxies. And these are the things where they come in all different shapes, sizes, types, and styles, as well as kids barging in and getting into the shop.
Wow. What can you eat?
Arthur,
Yogurt.
Arthur, yogurts or apples? Go.
All right, love you. Close the door.
What can I eat? So epoxies, most people think about them in their curing time. In other words, are they 5 minute, 10 minute, 30 minute, 2 hour? And the curing time is rather important. Generally, the longer the cure, the stronger the glue. The faster the cure, the more brittle the glue. But that isn't always true. There's always some mixes between those. I keep 5 minute glue around for when I need to fix something, but I don't use this for structural connections. You're looking like you had a question. Nope, okay, good.
No, I have questions, but not right this second.
I have I have some glue that I use. It's a 30-minute glue, and I use this for a lot of my metal to wood glues. It's a good all-around glue, and that 30-minute time frame is enough for like putting scales onto wood. And I really like the stuff. I've tried a couple different ones. This is one that I can't remember the actual manufacturer. It's the one that Tay Tools sells, but it's called the Slow Cure 30-minute. 30 minutes really isn't a slow cure, but it's actually pretty good for that. Then the epoxy that most people think about are the big sets. So we have the ones from West System, and then I've got the ones from Titebond, and these are the two main ones that I use quite a bit. And these are great. Let me show the label out so you can see what it is. These are great structural glues, and you buy them in a big kit, and this big kit lasts you for years. And I know people who have had these kits sitting in their cabinet for 10 years plus, and they're still good, viable glues. So it really is an investment to get these. You're probably going to be spending upwards of $100, $150 for a kit, but it's a kit that's going to last you for dozens and dozens of projects for a decade or more, depending upon how fast you use it. And if I'm ever doing a glue up that I know I'm going to be stressed about, if I'm ever doing a glue up where I'm worried about the connection, if I'm ever doing a glue up where I have gap filling, I use epoxy. And I find I use epoxy more and more than I use the PVA glues because it is a known substance. It is a structural glue that even if I mess up the application of it, as long as I've mixed it right, it will take care of it. If it has any moisture issue going outside, it will take care of it. Epoxies just are an all-around great glue, and I find myself using them more and more and more. And anytime I use them in a video, I always have people, why are you using epoxy rather than a PVA? Because it's a known thing. I trust it, and it works very well. Downside to it is in no way is it reversible. Once it's on, it's on. You can't fix it. Even CA glues, cyanoacrylate, you can reverse them. Epoxies, they're solid. Same thing with the weldwood, the plastic resins. They're solid. So you're not going to get anything to change from that. But the nice thing with these is you've got a lot of working time. I've had glue ups where it's taken me over an hour. And the PVAs, you've got minutes to work. Especially if you're doing a large glue up like laminating together a bench top.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You've got to move quickly. Otherwise it will start to set up. Whereas with the epoxies, you got working time. Epoxies don't dry, they cure. So if it's in the middle of a large buildup, like if you have laminated layers together, if you put in a PVA, PVAs and high glues dry. So the moisture has to get out. And if it's sandwiched in the middle of a large piece of wood, it's going to take a long time for that moisture to get out. With an epoxy, it cures. So you don't have to worry about that. You know that in 6 hours when it's done curing, it's cured. Whereas if I'm laminating up a bench top with PVAs, I might have to leave it in clamps for a week or more until the inside of it fully cures. So other things to keep in mind. Any questions?
Yeah, hang on 1 second. Caleb Sheffield, what about construction adhesive? Any use for that in woodworking?
You're reading my mind. I have a tube representing construction adhesive. I don't actually have any construction adhesives in the shop right now because I used them all on the glue test. And there are certain YouTubers out there that swear by construction adhesives. However, I tested, I think it was like 10 different construction adhesives in the last test, and very few of them had any strength performance that I would trust. They just did not work well. I haven't found one that holds anywhere near as well as Titebond 2. And yeah, I haven't found a reason to use them. Per capita, they're expensive, they're messy, and unless you take really good care of it, you get one use out of the tube, maybe 2 or 3 if you're lucky, but if it sits too long, then you've got this whole top section that's dry. And yeah, there are ways around that, with capping it and taping it and putting the nail in and that type of thing, but they always tend to be more of a pain than something you know. So construction adhesives, no, not in woodworking. I really haven't found a great source for them. They're okay at filling gaps. The good thing about them is that they do have elasticity. So if you have a joint that's going to be moving and going to be twisting, maybe. But yeah, I don't think I would. So construction adhesives, there's a reason I don't actually have any construction adhesives in the shop. This is a caulk because I bought a tube of all of them to do the glue test, and I haven't gone and gotten any more. So yeah, don't use construction adhesives for woodworking. And if you want to see the data on it, go look at the chart down below. Numbers don't lie. It's pretty sad. The last category that is something specific are the contact adhesives. And this is something that a lot of leather workers swear by is contact adhesives, particularly barge. Barge is one that comes up all the time. And you'll hear a lot of leather workers that absolutely swear by this. And it doesn't do very well in woodworking. Barge, Super 77, other contact adhesives, DAP, they just didn't hold up well for wood-to-wood construction. A lot of the tests I've done for leather-to-leather and leather-to-wood, they've held up rather well. And for that, I generally like them. I don't like them as much as I like hide glue. Hide glue works far better leather to leather and leather to wood because it's hide.
That's because you're always saving your hide.
Oh yes, yeah. Hide glue when you glue leather together, it's actually called welding because you're adding more of the same material. And contact adhesives, they work well for leather to other sites, but they don't work as well as hide glue. And so I don't have much use for contact adhesives in the shop. And I bought this big thing of barge thinking, oh, I'm going to use it all the time because people talk about it. It's great for leather, and it just doesn't hold up when you actually do the comparison in numbers. So I've got this big thing of it that's probably going to go bad in the next 10 years. I don't even know if I can get the lid off now. But it's great for pulling out when I want to show people contact adhesive. Yeah, okay, so that's the rundown of general types of glues. I'm sure there are a lot of questions. Am I right?
There are several.
Okay, so let's actually jump into the questions then. I'll hit some of the points left.
All right, John Migl asked, what is the best glue for cutting boards?
Okay, that's an interesting one. Okay, because you are going to be in a moist environment. Now, most of the time, if you make a wood cutting board, you tell people, hand wash it, do not submerge it, do not put it in the dishwasher. And in that case, for a lot of it, the Titebond 3 is going to not be a problem because you're not going to be getting the inside of the board wet. And it will hold up. This is water resistant. It's not waterproof. However, for me, if I'm making a cutting board, I'm using plastic resin. Willed Weld is what I would use on a cutting board. The problem is you start to get into the area where people start saying, well, what's food grade? Hide glue is food grade, but I wouldn't use it on a cutting board because you get it wet at all and it goes bad. It releases. Most of the hide glue tests didn't even make it to the test stand. The blocks just fell off the wood when they got wet. So I wouldn't use it on a cutting board, but it's pretty much the only food grade glue that's here. Now, how much glue is going to leak into the food from cutting board? Not enough to really matter. So for me, wood weld is what I would use. Is it food grade? Not officially, but none of these have gone to the FDA, so who knows? Speaking of which, I actually have a finish coming up. I'm going to be doing a boiled linseed oil. I found several places that say they have natural boiled linseed oil, and one of them actually went to the FDA, a finish that was approved by the FDA. So if you want food grade, there you go. But in glues, I've never heard of a glue going to the FDA. So what's next?
Hang on. Tommy Roberts. I don't know if you've answered this in the middle of your rambling. Do you know the difference in open time between Titebond 2 and 3?
Titebond 3 has a little bit more open time. However, the biggest thing with PVAs and open time is how thickly do you put it on. If you put it on good and thick, you've got a decent amount of open time. If you put it on really thin, you don't have much open time. And so the difference between Titebond 2 and Titebond 3, if I put Titebond 3 on thinly, and I put Titebond 2 on thickly, Titebond 2 will have far more open time than Titebond 3. So open time when PVAs is kind of a wishy-washy thing. But if you want a little more open time, there's that. Titebond also makes one called Extend, or if you're in German, there's the Fix and Fest. They have one that's Fix and Fest Express, which is fast, and then the Fix and Fest Waterfest, which is supposedly waterproof, but it's not waterproof, just like Titebond 3. Yeah. Fosterfest. I don't know where it is. But yeah, they have... Titebond has one that's called Extend, which I have a bottle in there somewhere. And it has a pretty decent open time, but again, you put it on thin and it's going to dry out pretty quickly because PVAs dry. They don't cure. So if they're on thick, then the stuff on the bottom can't dry out. Yeah, if you're wanting open time, then a hide glue is actually really nice for it because they do allow a lot more movement over time, and they don't actually like stick. you can rub them together and they'll slide a little bit easier before they solidify. So if I need the open time and I want to use something that's more like a PVA, I generally go high glue. But if I'm really worried about open time, it's epoxy. What's next?
Troy Jacobson, thinking about making a couple of canoe paddles, what would be a good glue for that? Thinking epoxy.
Either epoxy or a wood resin, plastic wood resin. If you're going to do a fiberglass wrap, then I'd probably just stick with whatever epoxy you're going to be using the fiberglass wrap on. But either of the High Performance or the West system, they will treat you very, very well for a professional thick bond. There's another one here, Thixo, which is actually you get a caulk gun, but you put a mixing tip that goes on this. And this is stuff that a lot of boat companies will use for putting together. And this is actually pretty nice. One of the nice things about epoxies is you don't have to have a perfect joint. You can have glues that don't fit exactly, and they will still work really well. They don't have to be clamped tight, even if they're loose fitting. The epoxy will still hold, and most everything else has to have a good clamping joint. So if I were making the paddle, I would probably go with the epoxy. Probably West System or Total Boat High Performance would be my choice. Although it's kind of a toss-up between that and wood weld plastic resin. Point is, in the end, both of them will hold stronger than the wood around them. So if the paddle's going to break, it's going to be the wood around it, not the joint that the glues are connected to. So in that case, you're usually over-engineering. What's next?
Hang on a second.
I'm hanging. Thank you for coming down, babe.
You're welcome. I might be asleep by the end. If any of you see me like kicking and looking like I'm having a seizure, that just means Sarah's super tired and she needs to go to bed. Or if I start doing this, I'm fine. I'm just tired.
Restless leg syndrome. Never good
Restless
for the spouse.
body syndrome.
What's next?
Let's see. Woodwork Learner. Are the low smell epoxy weaker than others?
There are so many different types of epoxies and so many different mixtures and glue times and epoxies that are for fillers and epoxies that are for structural adhesion and epoxies that are just for holding in place, epoxies that are for gap filling. And they have so many wildly different things that making generalities about a type of epoxy is not something I can do unless I've actually tested and done comparisons. But in most cases, it's rare to come across any epoxy that is weaker than the wood around it. So I don't think it would be of any difficulty at all. Epoxy, they have several that are absolutely phenomenal. Are they as strong as High Performance? They're probably a little weaker, but they're still far stronger than the wood around them, so it wouldn't be something I'd worry about. What's next?
If she starts talking to herself, she's been sampling the hospitals at Chilenski. This is the rule. You can talk to yourself. You can argue with yourself. You just cannot argue with yourself and lose. That's the line. All right, Perez Hernandez. I have a heirloom, I'm tired, instrument
Similar to a mandolin made out of a Flamboyan Wood. That sounds fun. Unfortunately, some of the wood is rotted. Can I use epoxy to strengthen it?
Yes, actually there are a couple of epoxies that are called penetrating epoxy. And Total Boat has one that's really good. I think I have a link to that on my website if you want to see it. Otherwise, if you search for Total Boat penetrating epoxy, it should come up. But what that actually does is it's a very, very thin epoxy, and it will soak into the wood and stabilize and harden the wood itself. And that's very, very good for wood that is punky or soft or starting to rot. It's the wood for that. Having issues?
This battery, I think, is dying.
Sorry, I can't fix it right now. That one's in depth to take apart. If you want to pull down the mic from the ceiling, you can turn that one on.
That doesn't sound weird at all.
The other one, not that one.
This one?
No, that one.
This one?
Yep.
What
Just
is
yank on it, it comes down. You have to turn on the knob farthest to the left.
This one?
Yep. And you have to be close to that one for it to pick you up. What's the next question?
Sarah keeps feeding. Is this better? I feel like I should talk like this. That's not creepy at all.
What's next then?
Sarah's so tired her voice went to sleep.
That's pretty much it.
All right, let's see. David had a question. Which is cheaper, PVA or epoxy? Epoxy sounds really great.
PVAs are generally cheaper. You can get a gallon of Titebond 2 usually for $20. A gallon set of epoxy is 100 to 150. So yeah, PVAs are generally cheaper. However, if you were talking something like Titebond 50, which is a lot of instrument makers really like this stuff, 'cause it's kind of the classic blend of Titebond. This is actually more expensive than epoxy because you're buying small samples, and it's like $15 for this little bottle, whereas it would be $150 for the whole thing. So it depends on what you're comparing. But if you're comparing, standard Titebond 2 to high performance, Titebond 2 is going to be far cheaper. Oh, and if anyone can ask for the super chats that were earlier, did I have a bar that popped up that said super chat under the post? I wanted to see if.
Oh, like when we watched that with its channel.
Yeah. I was trying to make that work, but I don't know if it did.
No, that would be awesome. No, at least not
So.
on our end. I don't know if it comes up that way on our end.
No, it wouldn't appear on ours. I was wondering if
It
anyone
like
else
goes
saw
like
it.
woo woo.
Yeah.
That was very tempting. If nursing doesn't work out, I could go into radio. Yes.
What's next?
Maybe they'd give me a raise compared to James Loyal.
Raise? I'll double your raise.
And you double, yeah. It's easy to double nothing. Let's see. Colton, what did Colton ask? What is the best way to align boards and prevent slippage when edge gluing panels?
My favorite clamp is a panel clamp. It has two bars that go across the whole panel and hold the thing together, as well as clamping it from the end. I don't have one in my shop. One of these days I'd probably make a set. Shannon Rogers from the Hand Tool School, he has a set and has done a couple of videos on them. They're really cool, but generally, I don't know. A couple times I've used them, I found them to be a little bit gimmicky, but they are really quick and easy to put together because they clamp from all sides all at once. So, yeah, I don't know if if it's worth it. Generally, what I do is I clamp them and I put a little bit of pressure on them, not much, just enough to hold them in place. Then I'll come through the mallet and tap them all down nice and flat, and then clamp them a little bit more, and then fix the little spots here and there, and then clamp them all the way. If you're really running into time with a PVA that might be a little fiddly and they might start to set up before you can move them, in which case then epoxy allows them to slide a lot easier. But yeah, that's about it. I mean, the other thing is you can't always do calls, which are boards that go on either side, and those boards then get clamped down so that they hold the surface. But if you have long, wide boards and you're trying to clamp into the middle, the calls generally don't do unless they're taller, larger calls. And some people will actually do those. You'll get like 2x4s, and you will camber one edge so that the bottom edge is flat and the top edge has a slight round. Then you put your panels on top of that, and you have a matching one that's upside down on top, and you clamp those together so those add pressure into the middle. And that'll add pressure all the way across all the boards, so you get a nice pressure on there. But in the end, it's a lot of work for something that I generally don't find. I find it just quicker to tap them all down and get them flush, and then come back through the card scraper and clean them up a little bit. But it's kind of a personal preference. So yeah. What's next?
Well, Steve does stuff. Tested it for us, so yes, it does work.
So it pops up across there? Did you see it on our end?
I did not see
Okay.
it.
Well, thank you, Steve.
Ready?
What's his?
What do you call an email that is about pork, ham, salt, and preservatives?
Pork, ham.
Spam.
I was going down the bacon route. tonight. What's the next question?
What's next? Sean Harry. What does Sean Harry want? Will you talk about gluing in cooler temps? And then he clarified 40 degrees or less, obviously, in Fahrenheit. And then he put PVA glue.
Yeah, and that's one of the things with epoxies is you have to have good gluing temperatures. Usually you want the temperature to be like 70 degrees or above. Some places you really want it to be up around 100 to get a good curing on that. If it's cooler, it just means it's slower. But if you're down below 50, 60, a lot of the epoxies just run into all sorts of problems, and you have to keep those warm. PVAs, generally, as long as it's above freezing, they will work. They just take a lot longer because, again, they dry, they don't cure. So as long as you don't freeze them, they're generally good. So if you're going to be doing in 40, 50 degree temperatures, PVAs will work for you. You just have to leave them clamped about 3 to 4 times the amount because it takes longer to dry in those temperatures than it does when it's hot out. So yeah, PVAs generally not much of a problem. Hide glues, I've never actually looked at. I don't think they have anything on these for temperature. Best to use in temperatures above 50 degrees. So yeah, stay above 50. But honestly, I think they'd be in pretty much the same category with the PVAs because they dry rather than cure. So you get below 50 degrees and it just takes a lot longer for them to dry. If they freeze while they're still wet, it's bad. So don't let that happen. But 40 degrees, yeah, you're kind of pushing it. You're getting close to freezing, but it's going to take a lot longer. It's going to take a lot longer. But as long as you have the clamp up time, you're willing to let them sit for a day or two, then you should be fine.
So instead of saying something's bad, I can say something like, looks like your glue's frozen.
Yeah. What's
Sorry.
next?
It's from all the red green you've made me watch.
Good old show.
It is a good show. All right, so they want you to know about your little super chat thing. It's very technical. It fades into the walnut of your workbench. The text is dark blue and it's fading, so they're recommending like a white outline.
I should have a white background on it. Yeah, I'll play with that. Thanks for the info.
All right, what's next? Let's see. Dennis Meko. I think what he's trying to ask is there a glue with dangerous fumes?
Dangerous fumes depends on what you consider dangerous. Epoxies are going to have VOCs, most of them. You do have some like Epoxy that don't have any VOCs, but most of them have VOCs. PVAs, no. Hide glues, you could drink it if you wanted to. Contact cements, oh yeah, had happy times in college with contact cements. Whew, the one drug Maranatha allowed. Yeah, that was good. Epoxies, yeah, that really starts to irritate your eyes. CA glues, that stuff really starts to irritate your eyes if you use too much of it. So if you are sensitive to that, then definitely stick with your PVAs and your hide glues, or things like Epoxy. But most of the hide glues and PVAs don't have a thinner, so you're not off-gassing anything. You're just getting rid of the moisture in them. So, yeah. What's next?
And then Dennis had another question. How much glue did Sarah use on her bench top, and what kind?
I used up, I have so many different PVAs that we end up using like 5 different glues, and I'm just trying to finish off the bottles.
3, but anyways.
It was 3 bottles, yeah. Okay, I used the Titebond Extend. I used up all that one.
There was a green label, there was a red label.
And then I used some of the 4/4, and I used some of the Titebond too. And yeah, we used up quite a bit.
And we used about that.
Glued it on and rolled it. Smeared it onto the brush and
yes,
rolled it up flat.
So.
Yeah, we were trying to show in that you can do it with cheap glue.
But I
You
would
just gotta
never
work
do
quickly.
it again.
If we used epoxy, it'd be much better because then we can get it all flat and true, and it'd be spending a lot less time actually flattening it.
Had I known. Had I known. But I was trying to do it for the non-technical woodworker. Let's just learn from others' mistakes. Okay. Pyroclast said, just want to see the fancy schmancy animation again. All right.
Yeah, I'll have to fix that down below. So it was the first time playing with that because I finally found a plugin that worked, and it's like, yay!
Ready?
Yep.
Why couldn't the kid see the pirate movie?
Why?
Because it was rated R. You're getting the tired mom joke tonight.
Yes. What's next? Thanks, Pyroclast.
What size bottles? Oh, Steve does stuff. The bottles I think we used for the bench top. They're just the normal.
Yeah, we used how many ounces in one of these? 16 ounces. So we ended up using probably about 18 ounces for the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it was slightly more than one of these whole. I just had like halves of these I wanted to get rid of because I have so many glues left over from the tests. What's next?
All right, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions, and we're at 51. Probably.
We'll get a few in, but we'll see. Maybe I'll rapid fire them out.
Depends how much you talk. So I have J&J. I don't know if it's Wouters or Wouters. Depends on where you live or how it's pronounced. Are some CA glues better than others? Did we talk about that?
In the tests I've done, no. I tried the cheap CA glue and the high-end 2P10, and the cheap CA glue actually did really well. It was one of the better ones. Let me see. Yeah, the number 3 overall glue. Over all glues I tested, number 3 was 2P10 gel. 2P10 thick was like 7 or 8. 2P10 thick with adapter was up there. Where is the cheap one? Where did it go? Oh, cheap super glue was down at 14. So it was right up there with the others. That was right where the gel with activator was. So and this is literally the little tubes you can get at the dollar store, and they did really well. So I mean, CA glue is CA glue, and there really isn't much difference between brands that I've tested. So don't worry about that too much. If you just need little bits, go from the dollar store and get the tube. I like having the whole kit of thick, thin, and gel and activator because there are times where I like a gel and there are times where I like it thin and there's times where I like it a medium. So having that selection of thicknesses, I find that to be very useful. But most of the time, I'm just going to be using a medium. A medium or a thick does for 90% of the little, oh, stink, it busted off, I got to glue it back on. What's next?
Chris Peters, what's your favorite 5-minute epoxy?
Don't really have one. Whatever 5-minute epoxy is cheapest. Because with most 5-minute epoxies, you're not going to be getting a crazy strong glue. It's going to be a fairly brittle glue, just because that's what has to happen to make it 5-minute. And so I usually go and get one of these cheap squeeze-out glues, and they work pretty well. So that's like this one's Loctite epoxy. It's the cheapest one at the big box store.
All right, ready?
What's that?
Adam Chilenski, with Urea Formaldehyde glues, what considerations do you take with the VOCs?
Those are, you add urea or formaldehyde to the hide glues. And honestly, I don't. Because it's such a small amount that it really isn't any difference. And honestly, the historical method, because what you do is you take the hide glue, which is basically dried out hide, you add water, you heat it up, and you get a paste you can put onto your surface. The problem is that paste dries out pretty quickly. So historically, what would happen is the woodworker would pee into the pot and use that water to make the glue. And the urea in that would give you a longer open time. And that's where it came from. So really, that's as bad as it gets. So I mean, there are people out there who that small amount would affect, but for me, it just doesn't affect anything at all. So not something I even think about. What's next?
Chris Peters, what's the best glue for joining wood to metal?
Wood to metal, I generally go with an epoxy, particularly if you're talking like small pieces, like knife scales to metal. I like a 30-minute. It's a pretty good base. This stuff from Tay Tools is what I use. I found it to be really, really good for scales to wood. If it's bigger things, then I'm going to be using something more structural, like a high performance or a West System epoxy. That's where that really comes out. Hide glues don't work quite as well with wood and metal. They're great with leather and metal, but wood and metal, not so much. So, yeah, epoxy is the way to go. What's next?
Last question. Alex Lopatka, what's the best glue for a thin crack in a wooden plane? Epoxy?
Honestly, any of them will do because it's not a high-stress joint. As long as you get the glue in there deep enough. And what you're going to want to do is open the crack up and let the glue soak in there, and then add a little bit more glue, and then add a little bit more glue, and then add a little bit more glue, and try and toothpick it as far in as you can and let it sit. And then just before the glue starts to set, squeeze it up and clamp it. Because you want to let it work down as far as it can into that joint. So usually what I'm going to use is a thinner epoxy that has a longer setting time. So like I'll use the high performance glue, or I might even use the thick set, which takes like 3 days for it to cure, but that thinner epoxy will soak down in there. I wouldn't use the penetrating epoxy because it's not as good as an adhesive as it is for just soaking in. But honestly, any of these glues you can get down there. The problem with the PVAs is they're really thick and they don't tend to soak down as far. So that's why I would like to go with a thinner epoxy, just because it will soak down farther into it. But yeah, if you just watched, I did a video on restoring a wooden plane about a month or so ago, and I used epoxy for that, and it worked out pretty well. Woohoo! We hit all of them.
Well, we got one that snuck in.
Oh, okay.
So, Elliot Nesterman asked, have you tested Titebond Stick and Quick?
Yes. Yep.
How might it compare to construction adhesive?
Titebond Thick and Quick here. It far outperformed construction adhesive for wood to wood. It was, yeah, that's good stuff. It wasn't as good as Titebond 2, Titebond 3, but it's really good. It's a solid PVA glue, but way outperformed any construction adhesive. Construction adhesive didn't hold a candle to most of the PVAs. And again, if you want to see all of those, I have a link to the video down below where I went into detail on the test, as well as the spreadsheet where you can see all of the numbers. And if you are a numbers freak, that spreadsheet will make you very happy, because there's lots of numbers in there. I did 10 tests on every one of the glues in 4 different scenarios. So it was a lot of tests.
That's the difference between James and I. He loves Excel. Just give me the graph.
I literally dream about Excel and spreadsheets and graphing things out. That's fun. Cool. Well, we were able to rapid fire those out, and I think I'm going to put Sarah to bed. So if anyone has any other questions or thoughts on glue, send me a message, and we'll look forward to it. Yeah, not sure what we'll be doing Tuesday, but we'll let you know. I have a few fun ideas. On that note, let's get you to sleep.
All right.
So I think I'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day.